Good afternoon, everyone. Give it just a few minutes for everybody to come in. We'll get the live stream started. So last week we had a pretty good live stream. Never know how these things are going to go. So we'll try and make it a little bit more upbeat this week. I have a few videos I'm going to be showing you in the next couple of weeks. We're going to be doing the Helen meet. I've almost got that video edited. It's just been hectic the past couple of weeks. And we've also got a few videos that I have over on Patreon that I'll be bringing over here and we'll be talking about during the live stream. But yeah, we got a few people in here. Good morning, everyone. Some people, it's still morning. Here on the East Coast, it's afternoon. So hope everybody's having a good Sunday so far. Let's see, it's pretty chilly outside here. Good afternoon, Don. What's everybody working on today? As we get in the groove of these live streams, I'm going to try and get them a little bit more upbeat. I went back and watched a little bit of the old ones, and I feel that could be a little bit more upbeat. So we'll try and move through things a little bit quicker and make it a little bit more enjoyable. If you guys got any questions, just let me know. Of course, I realize that I also don't really introduce myself. A lot of you guys know me, and that's typically who's here. But a lot of you guys that are watching these live streams afterwards may not. So I am Brent, and I own Andreas LLC, which is, as far as I know, we are the largest 944 only repair shops anywhere around. All we do is work on 944s. A lot of you guys know that, but for those that don't, welcome to my garage. We have got a lot going on. Any given time we get anywhere from 15 to 20 944s here. And that's me cutting it down. So a lot of times we could possibly have more than that, but we get overrun with them. So take you guys around and show you some of the stuff. It's a mess in here. But yeah, this is pretty much what we're working on. If you want to see more details on the stuff behind me, then that's all over on my Patreon. I go through once a month, and for every Patreon supporter, I try and do a video on one car that we just finished up and is leaving. And I just got that one uploaded last night, which I'll be putting on my Patreon later today, probably as soon as the stream is over with. And then for the higher tier guys, you get to see every car that we have out here. So I'll take you around and talk about the stuff that we're working on every single car. But for the live streams, I just kind of hang out. And this is something I'd like to do with the Patreon supporters. I have quite a bit of them, but it's hard to get an audience together all at one time. So I just do it over here on YouTube, because I figured that this would be where I get the most views. Just do a live stream over here. I did one on Facebook there for a while, and it had a decent turnout, but after the live stream was over, then nobody typically watched. So I figured that I would just try it over here on YouTube. And so far it's been kind of fun, but like I said, I want to kind of get it upbeat so it's not so boring for you guys. John says, good morning to everyone. Well, good morning to you too. Don says he's gathering parts for his 944 spec engine rebuild. Lots of parts sitting around. I know how that is. So we're building about 5 engines right now, mostly turbo engines. And as those get a little bit closer, I'm going to be showing you guys what we're going to be doing to them. So Happy Fox says, why don't you guys have a swap Sunday or something? Meaning, what do you mean? Just showing like engine swaps that we're doing? What do you mean by that? Henry says, what are your opinions on the importance of a limited slip diff? Okay, so this has come up quite a bit this week, so interesting you should bring that up. So we are, okay, so I'll stay on the topic of the LSD. So this has come up quite a bit this week. This car right behind me, this black turbo, the owner did not know that he had an LSD. So when I let him know, he was pretty happy about that. His code was 484, which meant that he had the cooler for the transmission, which was a rare option, 87. But ended up that he had the LSD as well. Well, and very happy, but we're also turbocharging this 924S back here, and he already had a turbo trans, but now he wants to go with LSD, and he was asking me if he thought it was necessary to do so. So if you've got a 944 NA, it's maybe a controversial opinion. Sometimes things are controversial in the 944 world, but for no given reason at all. But as far as LSD on a naturally aspirated car, if you're tracking the car, absolutely. If you're not, probably not gonna really matter. But it is nice to have. I'm not gonna say it's not, but if you get a naturally aspirated car, I don't see the point in really going out of your way to get one unless you just absolutely want one for track duty. But when it comes to the turbos, I can definitely, that extra power really comes into play. So he's wanting to upgrade his to a LSD. So if you've got a turbo, yeah, I would say get one. It makes quite a bit of difference. But if you got a natural aspirated, I wouldn't. To me, it's not really a big deal. So I hope that helps. Then he, going back to Happy Fox comment, he said, why don't you have a swap Sunday or something? And he meant getting together somewhere to swap parts. We kind of do that once a year. I don't know that we can do that every week. And it follows that up with saying drinking coffee or whatever. There's quite a bit of 944 owners here in Charlotte, but it seems like we can just never get together on a date. We met up probably in the 20 years that I've been doing this. I've known about 4 or 5 meets, and really didn't work out. So, I mean, not that it didn't work out. It just couldn't get enough people together. I think there was 10 to 15 at one time, and then you'd try and do it again, and nobody showed up. So once a year we have the Helen meet, and I tell people about that, and I advertise for it over there on my Facebook page, and we get about 40 people each year coming out to that. But they'll go to nearby as 944 barn, and they'll do that kind of stuff there. Sometimes we'll go up there as a group, but for the most part, it's like an invitation. If you let Elliot know in advance, then you can come up there and do that. So as far as that goes, I don't know that there's a lot of interest, especially here in Charlotte. That's why we don't do it here. It's just hard to get everybody together, much less try and get them together for We would probably meet for coffee and a drive, but I don't know that there'd be very much interest in swapping parts. Um, the second thing is we do that once a year already. So yeah, and said you should have a 944 exchange. Um, yeah, well, there's people that already break these cars and have a bunch of parts for them. We typically dabble in used parts, so if we have something here, like we'll break down engines and stuff. A lot of the parts that we keep um, is ours to use on the next car. So I'm not really in the position to sell the parts that I do have. When I break a car, I'm probably going to keep all the parts for myself because we go through a lot of parts here. So we'll break an engine down. Maybe I'll show you here in a minute. We'll break an engine down and we keep the blocks that we have, the engines that we have, and we strip them down, replate them, clean them up. And I have thought about rebuilding some of the engines that I have and then selling them, but don't know that there's a huge market for it. But yeah, so I have thought about stuff like that. I don't know what the market is, but absolutely, I'd love to get together with the Charlotte guys. In fact, I thought about moving the Helen meet to Charlotte, but I don't know that it would draw quite the crowd that it does down there in Helen because there's way better roads to drive and there's things to do down there where you can go to Elliott's and if you get invited up there. So John says, with all those cars you work on, how do you keep the various tasks off your mind? I don't. It consumes everything. That's pretty much how it is. So it consumes your entire life sometimes. I am here from about 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. some nights and work 6 days a week. I'm here on a Sunday. So he says, of course, I get it. I'm not wanting to strip them too much, but everybody has some parts laying around. And, I've met in the past 2 weeks people that have been hoarding these parts for several decades. And I had two people reach out to me with tons of parts and ask me if I want to buy them. And I'm just not in a position to go through and buy a bunch of parts. I don't really have the room. Maybe when I get a bigger shop, I'll be able to buy a lot more. And what I don't need, I could sell off. But at this point, I pretty much end up using every single thing. As soon as I sell it, I'm going to end up needing it again. That's the way it goes. But even the most mundane thing, I'm like, oh, I've got 20 of these. I'll end up needing it. But yeah, I've been contacted by several people that have hordes of parts, and they're always looking to sell them to me, but I'm not in the position to just stockpile parts, unfortunately. So I have to pass on them. Yeah, part supply is pretty invaluable to these, especially as old as they're getting. Jim says, hey, Brent, I just refoiled my instrument panel, and when I reinstalled the center warning light is now on. Could be something's not plugged in well. You got 85.5 if I remember correctly. Well, it happens sometimes on the later 87 and later cars is that a diode blows in the oil level sender and that causes that light to come on, and there's nothing you can do other than send it off to be repaired or get another one. Or you can try and fix the diode yourself. Sometimes it's not fun trying to track that diode down, which one specifically burned up or why, and then you got a whole mess on your hands. But with an 85 and a half, could be that something wasn't plugged in fully. Also check that maybe someone didn't take a warning light out or something. Maybe your brake pad sensor is on, but that light isn't coming on, causing the light to come on. So he going back to talking about sales. It's like, I mean, to cut off the sales and do it more P2P, like no middleman. So if I was to more for new parts, so if I were to start selling, there's too many people that do that. What I'd probably do, and I've considered this as well, is get with someone like 944 store, or go with someone like 944 online and have them put together packages for me, because I think that some of these places, they sell kits for the front of engine service, but since we do a little bit more in our front of engine service, I thought about putting together a package so people could buy it. That's not going to really get rid of the middleman, but with a place like 944 online, they spend a lot of time trying to find hard to find parts, and so I could look around and probably do the same thing, but I just don't. It takes a full-time staff to try and search for some of these parts that I would need a full-time employee just looking around doing that stuff, and it may cut out the middleman, and it would allow me to get a more direct line to parts, but it's a challenge to find some of these parts. I'd rather go to someone who already does that. I wouldn't say I'd rather do it, but it's a little easier to just go to someone that already has these parts and has a line on them that's been doing it for decades, than to try and jump in and start doing that stuff myself. I don't know that it would go too well. So that's how I source a lot of stuff. Kenneth says, hello, Brent. Well, good morning, Kenneth. And John says, there are many parts here in the UK, but most of the cars are in a bad state. Other trouble is a right-hand drive. Just had to buy a new column steering and U-joint this week, which was pricey. Yeah, I can imagine. So one thing I always found funny, and this is just me saying stuff, but I know in Europe the cars are a lot more harder to find and can be a lot more expensive. And I'd actually heard a few years ago that, people from Europe were starting to buy cars in Florida, because down in Florida there's just hordes of 944s, and a lot of them don't have any rust, and they all came with air conditioning. They had the side markers and stuff, but there were people buying those. And I know it's a lot of money to ship it over there, but I think in the end you would end up saving money for trying to buy one in Europe. So I don't know why that didn't really ever become a thing, but I'd often thought about just getting together a collection of 944s and selling them to Europe. Don asked, is there a good resource for fuel injector rebuild that you use? I wanted to get a set refresh. Yeah, we use RC Injector out of Torrance, California. They're pretty good. I've used a lot of injector guys over the years, and the quality always seems to go down and down and down. I started out with one that was recommended on Renlist for years and years and years, and that was the worst quality stuff I'd ever seen. I'm not going to mention the name, but they started out good and then went downhill. And then I used one in Texas, and the guy was like really nice. He did top quality work there for a while. And then started going downhill, and so now we're at RC Injector, and they do a really good job. So check them guys out. Again, I'm not affiliated with them in any way, but that's the guys we use. And they'll let you know if the injector is bad or something. You just throw it away. Happy Fox says, I know someone that actually knows how to do the instrument panel, but it's in Spain. There are probably some electronic geeks that can figure it out with a guarantee where you are too. Yeah, there's a Hollywood speedometer in Hollywood, North Hollywood, California that's really good. Again, these are guys that we send stuff to. A lot of times we rebuild the speedometers and the odometer chipsets, and if something's fried in the circuit board, we can fix it, but it takes a lot of time. So if something's just really screwed up, or you're wanting to change the look of your gauges or something, I'm like, we'll put the white face gauges in there if you want them. That's pretty easy. But these guys can really go in there. If you want red needles, make them look fabulous. We can paint the stuff and make it look good too. But their stuff is just top notch. And let's see. But yeah, North Hollywood speedometer, those guys can custom make you stuff and put all new parts in there. When we repair, like this week, we had the odometer gear was good, but the odometer still didn't work. You could smell that the diodes was burned on the board, and you could see where it was burned. I probably still got it around here somewhere. And rather than changing that diode, I've got like 50 clusters over there. We just pulled another board off there and stuck it on there, and we got it working again. But that's the way we fix stuff. If the caps are original, we'll change the caps out, and hopefully I'll keep it from blowing diodes in the future. But that's about the extent of our stuff. Like, we can put new faces on, and we can change the color of the needles and get stuff working again. But those guys would put all brand new stuff in there, custom made. It's way beyond what we can do, and it's time consuming for us to do it. So we try not to get too deep into it, but those guys will fix it, and they'll have a guarantee. He also says, I just got a new old stock Bosch injectors. They pulled too much current to even work. I really want to know what injectors you recommend for an 83. Sorry, my watch keeps dinging. Like to turn that off. So for an 83, I know they're those lower impedance than the ones before it. I think they're higher impedance. I'd have to look back through my notes, but so luckily here lately, we have run out of 944 turbo injectors. I used to have a ton of them. So anytime we parted a car, I'd keep the injectors. And it's gotten to the point where I think I only had like 3 or 4 of them left. And so I sent those off to be cleaned as spares. And so I sent those off to be cleaned, and we put them on the shelf. But that was the last ones that we had. And then I think we ended up using them. So I had to order some online. And I've gotten 2 sets from this company. I'd have to look up the name of the company. And they work perfect. So I have ordered early injectors for a car, and they were the worst things I'd ever had. They were, you buy stuff online. They were cheap injectors. Paid a couple $100 for them. Put them in the car. The car didn't start. So I thought, they're brand new injectors, but I send them off to my guy to have them checked out just to see if they work. They did not work. They were, how can I say this? Like, they were probably just filled with gunk, and they look like new injectors, but inside there was just toy parts in there. And so they went in the trash, and it was a waste of money. So I really haven't had much confidence in buying new injectors online unless you're going to pay for the Bosch. But I have had a lot of good luck with these turbo injectors. They're cheap and they work great. So there may be an injector out there that you can find online, but the best luck I've had is just going on eBay, getting a set of used injectors somewhere, having them cleaned up and refurbished, and then that's probably the best way to go. Just get an original set, have them cleaned up at a RC injector or something, and that's probably your best bet. I don't know that there's a company out there making good early injectors. It's possible, but I haven't seen it personally. Um, I have just stacks and stacks and stacks of early, late turbo injectors. Well, turbo injectors, not so much anymore, but anytime I need one, I just pull them out and I send them off to get them clean. Kenneth says, after 13 years of babying my 89 turbo, I changed the timing belt and it started running a little more aggressive. Now it does not burn oil. Daily driver. Well, that's awesome. Glad to hear that. Yeah, sometimes I've seen that plenty of times before. Sometimes you'll change the belt and it's just a tooth off or something, and it makes a world of difference. Okay, he said those had the right resistance though. Let's see. Let me go back and read the previous comments. They pulled too much current. Okay, so they pulled too much current. Yeah, they're probably. I would just send them off and be rebuilt. Then, if they're the right ohms, the right resistance, and the right ohms, then they're just pulling too much current. Then they might be stuck. Send them off and see how that works out. They'll let you know. They'll let you know what's going on. Sometimes I send them off and they just got to be thrown in the trash, and I just send them another set. So it's the way it is. I agree. I think that the stock injectors are much better than what you buy now. I am pretty impressed with whoever is making these turbo injectors, though. They're doing a good job. I don't know how long they'll last, but considering the last set that I got was just toy parts. That's putting it lightly. There's no telling what was in there, just bubble gum and shoelaces. But these actually run the car, and how long they'll last, I don't know, but guess we'll find out. Kenneth says, now every month I have to add a gallon of water. Can't figure out where it's going. Oh, that's fine. I'll take you guys over here in a second and I'll show you something we're working on with this car over here related to coolant. Yeah, they're very noisy injectors. Blade says, hi Brent, do you know if comfort seats can be rebuilt and converted to sport seats by just changing the foam upholstery, or is it a different metal shell? I believe it's a different metal shell. I'm actually going to be taking apart some sport seats right there this week, and I'll take some pictures and I'll put them. If you're in my Facebook group, I'll post pictures of everything. These are going to be recovered burgundy, and they've also got to get the right inserts put in there. You can see someone put 928 inserts in there. I guess they had to shape it to do that. I don't know how they did it, but it's pretty interesting. But the car they're going into has a burgundy interior, so we've got to change all that. The ones that I've seen converted, I've seen them, they take the regular seat frame and then they weld a bigger metal bolster in there. So I don't know. You would think that you could just add the padding. But I believe that you actually need to change the frame as well, just a little bit right there. All right. Don says, can you talk a little bit about changing the lift or checking the lifters? I have a couple that are rock hard and I think they need to be replaced. Okay. We'll definitely do that. And then John says, I need some door cards, black and linen vinyl. I think I've actually got a set. I have to check the condition of them. They were nice when I took them off, but they've been in storage for 5 years now. So check on that. Send me an email. Go to my website and just write me an email. There's a link there. And I'll check on the condition of them and I can send you some pictures. Like I said, they've been stored for about 5 years, but when I took them off, they were really good. They even still had the inserts for the controls for the window, and that wasn't ripped out at all. But it's been a few years, and that's not a climate controlled shop where it's at. So just have to take a look at it, and if you want them, we'll figure something out. Things can get soggy in shops without climate control. So might go over there and they've rotted to pieces. Okay, two things. We're going to talk about lifters and we're going to talk about coolant. So let's see. Chat's moved pretty quick. So I think it was Kenneth. Yeah, Kenneth said something about losing coolant. So with this car here, we've got a leak. This is our pressure tester. This is what we do to every car before it leaves. We put the pressure tester on there to make sure that not only do we not have any leaks, but we're not losing any pressure. So we pressurize this up to about 11 psi. We don't go over that because when driving, the max will be 16 when it opens the pressure cap, but we do it about 11. If it's going to leak at 11, it's fine. So this one we put on Friday, and it's gone down to a little below 7 psi now. So we got a leak somewhere. It's filled with coolant. We don't have coolant anywhere that I can find. I think there's a little drip, but it's so tiny. Can't tell where it's from. It could be leaking from, if you look here, it's crusty. So even if it's not leaking here, this is probably leaking air. So probably going to go ahead and and by air, I just mean pressure. But this should be filled up. I don't know. It was empty when we got it. We put water in it just to test the system. But we used only distilled water. We just put it in there just to see. There's a little bit of coolant in there already, but not much. So I'm making this clear so you guys just don't put pure water in there. But this is just for testing purposes. We want to see where everything's going to leak out. But you can see it's corroded here. If you have any of this corrosion here, you're better off just cleaning it up, replacing that, probably replacing the hoses. Then down here, I think is where our leak is. But is it leaking here, 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 here? We don't know. So I guess our best bet at this point is to just go ahead and replace these hoses and clean everything up. And I'm pretty sure we're going to find it by doing that. And that way we don't have, with this pressure tester, we don't have to drive the car and get it up to temperature before we find out that there's a problem with the system. So at this point, we know we've got a leak. We know it's somewhere, but where it is, we don't know. Now, this isn't something we come across all that often. Usually the leak's obvious, but in this case, if you're losing about a gallon of coolant a month, then more than likely you've probably got something like that. You probably got multiple leaks, but they're so slow and so small that it's probably going to take rebuilding the coolant system with new hoses, cleaning all the stuff up. Excuse me. and replacing the hoses to finally get rid of it. If you have silicone hoses, you may just never get rid of those leaks. Those things are hard as bricks, and you can do whatever you want to them. And sometimes you can just never get those to hold pressure. You might not lose coolant, but you'll just never get it to hold pressure in those things. Okay. So Happy Fox says, what is your favorite coolant? Okay. So this is what we use here. And cars come in with different stuff. We get cars like this one that has the orange stuff in it. And someone actually asked me about that. And not too long ago, they asked me the difference between the pink and I see so many cars with orange, which is the Dex Cool from GM, that my brain went there. I completely forgot Porsche also has a version of Dex Cool, which is the pink stuff. And I gave them the same answer, but I said it was a GM only thing because it is, but brain fart. I rather than explaining the pink, which is Porsche's version, I kind of went into Dex Cool, but it's pretty much the same stuff. Okay, so this here is what we use. We use either the Prestone or I think Peak makes one, and either or depends on where we go or who sends it. We use we'll sometimes use World Pack to send us stuff because it just shows up and we get a better deal on it. So, but we go with the blue. And the reason why is that it replaces the green stuff that you have to change every 3 years, 30,000 miles. And if you don't get it right, then it likes to, I'll show you. If you don't get it right, you end up with a cooling system that looks like that and stains your block. You got to make sure you change that stuff 3 years or 30,000 miles, and you might want to do it a lot more frequently than that. You can see here, even though this engine looks like it's been down on the Titanic, someone was changing the coolant at the right intervals, and it looks good. So I say just don't use the green stuff if you can help it. It's what's supposed to be in there. It's fine, but you just got to change it more frequently. The blue stuff replaces all that, and it's 150,000 miles. So there you go. It's either this or Peak is what we use. You get the European stuff. And in that case, you don't have to change it as frequently. And it's pretty good stuff. Goodness says, thanks. I do have a couple of rust spots like that. Just like, yeah. That dried up crusty stuff you're seeing, even though it may not be leaking coolant like where it's obvious, that dried up crusty stuff is where the coolant's been escaping. I don't know. I can get that laptop down there and let you see it, but there is a ton of dried up coolant on top of this hose. So that's why I said it. You can see it's, maybe you can see it's crusty right there. So it's been leaking here. Not enough to get wet, but enough to like lose coolant, and the coolant's been drying up. Okay, going into lifters. I got some lifters over here. Let me put some gloves on and we'll go over lifters. Let's see. So my green was a couple of degrees cooler than anything else. It didn't matter before I moved the car to a hotter climate. Now the fan's kicking in so much I need a lower thermostat with the best blue. Huh. Okay. This is where we keep our lifters. If you're having temperature differences between the coolants, then it may be your mixture. Could probably try and add a little bit more water. See if that helps. Let's see, in this drawer, yeah. Try one of these. So this here is going to tell you your mixture with coolant. So this will tell you pretty much everything you want to know. So it's got Fahrenheit degrees, and it's going to tell you pretty much all you need to know. Your mixture and how to get it to cool your engine better. You want to add a little bit more water. If you move to a warmer climate, you may not want to go with a 50-50 mix. You may want to go a little bit more, and just try that. All right, lifters. So these are a mess. Let me grab a shop towel. Oh, we got a bunch of helicopters flying over. Oh, what time is it? What the heck? Oh, check it out. See them? Yeah. That was awfully loud. They must be heading to the football game. They're playing Dallas today in Charlotte. I should have ran. Happy Fox says they found you. Yeah, I should have ran the other way. Yeah. Yeah, they're having a football game playing Dallas today. That's why I'm not at home. I live next to the stadium, and it gets kind of crazy. People say, "Oh, you live near the stadium. You probably go to every football game." No, I watch it on TV. It's a better view. And I don't have to fight the traffic. All right, so this is a lifter I just pulled out of this mess. We leave them sitting in oil, so that way they're always lubricated when we're ready to go put them back in. And in this case, this one is really soft. And how long's this one been out? I'd say probably 3 weeks since this car has ran, and it's really soft. This may not be a bad lifter, but I wouldn't put it in my car to find out. When they're soft like this, they're going to clack as soon as you put them in there. So there is something you kind of want to check as far as this goes. I'm not going to put this one back in. I wouldn't recommend putting a soft one back in, especially if it's only been about 3 weeks. They will pump down in 3 weeks. But if they're sitting in oil, it should take longer. This one also, it's like really squishy. It's not super squishy. I would say that this one's just like the other one, and it's not bad. But I'm just going to go through all these. I should have 8 here. Should be all of them. Okay, and then this one here, again, these have been sitting for 3 weeks. And yet this one, I'm trying to make sure it drips all the oil into the thing and not all over the floor. This one here is hard. So this one has not pumped down. And what you want to do with it is take your thumb, and either this one hasn't pumped down or it's broken. So while I don't like a soft lifter, I also don't want one that's too rock hard. So let's try another one. Now, getting the feel for this, of course, is going to just be one of those things. This one's also just rock hard. It should have a little bit of give, but of course, these have been stored in oil, so no, feels okay. So if you haven't been storing them in oil, you're going to notice they're hard. Yeah. So far we've had just 2 bad ones. And then I'll make that 3. So if you store them in oil, it's not a big deal if they're going to be rock hard. But if you just have them sitting out, like you put them in a Tupperware and you can push them just a little bit, but they feel firm. That's the way you want them. When they're soft like that, they're going to clack. They're going to clack the second you start the engine up. And will it go away? It might take a while for the engine to get warm. And I've even had like weird stuff happen where you drive the car around the block and it's still freaking clacking. And then you shut the car off and start it right back up immediately and it stops clacking, never clacks again. But that's always been with soft lifters. So I use, again, you don't want like a super firm, like you can't budge it at all. If it's been soaking in oil, that's okay. But if they've been sitting in a Tupperware container, like the longer it takes them to bleed down, the better. So this has been about 3 weeks. That's a good lifter. You don't want them to bleed down overnight or something. So a lot of people say, I want to put the soft lifters in there. That means it's not holding pressure, and you want them to hold pressure. So even if they've been on the shelf for a month, you want them to be kind of firm. Because you're going to end up, they already don't want to hold pressure. They're just going to get worse as they get older, and then they're just going to end up clacking more. So I've never had a problem with a firm lifter, putting them in, except one that's super rock hard, of course, because then there's something in there jamming it up. But if you can take it out and you can just push it just barely, it's a good lifter, because you got to think when they pump up, they're going to be rock hard. So that's how I test them. That's what I go with. Never had a problem whatsoever. I've had nothing but problems with soft lifters. Don't go near them anymore, even if they might pump up. I'm not taking a whole engine apart just to do that again. So yeah, that's how you check it. Now I've got oil all over the floor, but at least it's clean oil. But I hope that helped. Again, people have different opinions, but that's just my opinion. I don't know how many of these cars I've rebuilt, and I do not like a soft lifter. Oh, Chris says, recommendations for a first start after sitting 6 years. It is a 1986 NA. I want to avoid causing any damage to the engine. Yeah, here's what we do at the shop. So we got a car here. It's been sitting for about 15 years. I think the owner tried to start it up a few times. But this is another great thing I could probably do on a live stream sometime. So first thing to do, don't try and turn the key over. Rotate the engine a few times with a tool. Make sure that, nothing is going to bind up. You're going to rotate it, the crank twice, and then that's going to bring you back to TDC, and you're going to make sure that all the marks line up. If everything is lined up perfectly after you rotate it, then you don't have any mechanical damage. It should be fairly easy to turn. You might even want to take spark plugs out for it. Make it a little bit easier. But the plus side of doing it with the spark plugs in is you're going to know if you have compression. But next thing we do is we cycle the fuel pump using a jumper. That way we're not trying to put fuel into the engine itself. And many times we'll often even send the injectors off to be cleaned beforehand. But now, instead of a 3-prong jumper, we use a 2-prong. And we'll jump it from here to here. Don't know if you guys can see, but anyway, you're going to hear the fuel pump kick on here in a second because we're doing the same stuff on it. You hear the fuel pump? So fuel pump works. And then we do the jumper one across from each other like that, and that's going to turn the computer on. So with the computer on, we can start the car, and then we disconnect the spark plug leads and we check for spark. So on this car, we've already done that. We verified fuel pump works. Fuel is getting to the rail. We rotated the engine several times to make sure that there's nothing mechanically going on with it. Compression seems pretty good, just turning it by hand. And then we check the spark. Spark's all there. And so we also found that the spark plug wires were all screwed up on it. So it's good we found that before we ever turned it over. I think 2 was on 1 was on 2, and 3 and 4 were mixed up. So it just looked like what they'd done was the old 1, 2, 3, 4 around. If you've never seen that one's fine. But, it happens. So we check that. We check all this stuff before we do a startup. Anything else, we just, we're just checking for spark. We're just checking that the car has a little bit of compression, a little bit of give, but all the timing marks line up, and there's no hang up in the engine, such as any valves and whatnot. And then we do a pressure test on the system. So if you don't have one of these, they're at Harbor Freight. They're about $125. The last time I checked, they might be cheaper now. But pressure test that. You don't have to have the car running and stuff to do all that. You can just pressure test it, and you'll know before you ever drive it if you're going to just leak. Because how many radiators do we get in here and they just leak all over the floor? So it's better to know before you ever drive the car. But that's pretty much it. Check fuel pumps working, and even if the DME relay isn't working, we'll use a 3-prong jumper to jump the car. But that way we can control the fuel flow manually. So let's say we put the jumper on there to check the fuel pump. That's going to show us if we have any leaks in the fuel system. But once we start the engine up and we don't get anything, then we're going to know it's probably injectors. But again, we always send the injectors off with a car like this to make sure they're cleaned out, because stuff crystallizes in there and turns gooey. But worse than that, if something did happen, say a seal on the fuel injectors or something blew while we're trying to do this, and fuel starts coming out somewhere, we can just kill it without having to shake the DME relay out or turn the engine off or something. We can just do it nice and easy, and long before anything disastrous could happen. So anyway, hope that helps. That's just basically how we do it here. We just do a little bit. We like to test everything individually before we try and ever start it up. We want to make sure that the oil's circulating as well. But the only way to know that started up in most cases. All right, let's see. John says, I have an 87S and I have a tiny split in the fuel damper hose push fit. My search for a replacement seems to be part of the whole rail. It's original and it's time to replace it. Any suggestions? So let's see. All right. So actually, this is a 944S fuel rail, and you're saying you got one of these here. Renbei just sent me a kit for these. So if yours is leaking, Renbei is now making these. I actually might have one. And since you're going to send me the email about the door cards anyway. I actually have the lines if you want to try them, and just send those to you as well. But Rimbe is making the 944S hoses again. Says, thanks for what you do. I have a family here in South Louisiana. Awesome. No problem, man. Happy Fox. Can an injector that's not squirting right cause the engine to run hotter? Yeah, I can run lean. Take a lot of running lean to like make the engine temperature go up a whole lot, though. It's bound to happen. You mostly notice that the excess heat in the engine, like at the headers more than anything than in the cooling system. But you notice it. I don't know that it's going to make it go up drastically, but hey, anything's possible. Not a whole lot of few degrees. Yeah, it's possible. Something we used to do was put the thermo one of those thermo scanners on the headers to see which one's the hotter one. I actually had one here, but one of those thermo guns. Just shoot that at one of the headers after you've driven it a little bit. They should be all about even, but the one that's running lean is going to be extra cherry hot. But honestly, if you think that something like that's happening, you shouldn't drive the car because you can cause some damage doing that. But check the spark. If you touch the intake, someone mentioned to me not too long ago, I was touching the intake and it seemed kind of hot, and ended up they had the spark plug wires reversed. So never know. Okay, he says it looks even on the passive infrared. Well, I'd get those injectors clean anyway. It never hurts. The first thing I do with these cars, especially as old as the stuff is I just get the injectors clean and have them checked, because you can drive these cars for years and you don't really know that you're losing power or something's going goofy with the car, and you get the injectors back and it's just a completely different car. Dan asks, what's a good price for a used turbo engine? I think the going rate right now is about $2,500 for one. They might be more by now, but the last time I bought one a few months ago, it was about $2,500. All right, guys, we're moving up on 1 o'clock here. I want to thank you guys for coming out. I'm going to start winding down the live stream now. Again, thank you all for coming out. Time goes by fast on these things. I sometimes used to wonder how I was going to fill an hour, but it's getting to where it just flies by now. So anyway, guys, hope you enjoy the rest of your Sunday. Thanks again for coming out, and we'll see you next weekend.